Okay, Dad, today is Monday, August 26th, and let's start with the Middle East. So, just yesterday, which was Sunday, there were 100 Israeli aircraft that took off and preemptively struck Lebanon, and then Hezbollah retaliated right after. Um, is this an independent retaliation? Does it have anything you think to do with Iran? Is this just a minor escalation? What is the current status right now between?
Okay, well, the Hezbollah leader Nasrallah said that it was in retaliation for the assassination of their number two man, several weeks ago.
Fuad Shukr,
Uh,
right?
right, correct. So, but he also said that it was just the first phase; it wasn't over. That this was like the first part of the retaliation. And then,
No,
of course, as you just mentioned, Israel said that it carried out preemptive strikes on missile launchers that they had detected that Hezbollah had been set up missile launchers in various places in southern Lebanon, and that they struck them, and they claimed to have destroyed many, if not all of them. And then Hezbollah says they didn't destroy any of them. I suspect the truth is somewhere in between. Hezbollah claimed to have struck a number of targets and to have inflicted significant damage on the Israeli military, but the IDF says that the damage was minimal. One somewhat significant hit was on an Israeli naval vessel that killed a crew member and damaged the vessel. And then, other than that, they claim that not much happened. And who knows? Israel does have a record of sometimes of hiding damage that they suffer in attacks. But overall, I get the sense that that Hezbollah actually didn't do a whole lot. This wasn't a very effective attack. Maybe we'll learn about something later, but at present, there really isn't much evidence of any kind of significant damage, other than that one incident, the vessel that was struck.
so Hezbollah actually said that this is the first phase of a multi-phase attack. So
Yeah,
should we expect something?
well, yeah, I guess so. It was. I think most of us were expecting that an attack from Hezbollah would be coordinated with an attack by Iran. But that's not what happened. But maybe if this continues in the next phase, it will be. Who knows what's going on? If this was more of an exploratory kind of a strike to find out, probe for weaknesses in Israeli air defenses, or Nasrallah claimed that it was a successful. The point was to inflict damage, and that they did it. Um, Israel claims that there was very little damage suffered.
Do you think that they were acting more or less independently from Iran? That this was something just for Fuad Shukr, their sort of Hezbollah's own
Yeah.
independent thing that wasn't in any way coordinated? Because when I first saw this, I was thinking perhaps the strategy is to have Hezbollah to help expend more and more interceptors to prepare for the real Iranian strike.
Right.
Like could be the strategy, or these are the phases that Hezbollah is going to do,
Right.
not necessarily to try to inflict serious damage, but to burn up interceptors, wear down
Uh-huh.
sort of just begin the attrition war with
Yeah.
Israel.
Well, you may be right. That's certainly a possibility. Again, Nasrallah claimed that it was something much more than that, but maybe it wasn't. He does. There's no reason to assume that he's going to actually tell us what they're doing, especially if they're in the midst of some sort of multi-phase operation. So perhaps that was the point. Just like I was saying, partly probing the air defenses, and also, as you added, just causing the Israelis to expend more missiles, and making them therefore more vulnerable to further attacks. We'll have to see. Yeah, it's hard to. I'm sure that it was coordinated. There's no question that Hezbollah and Iran are in regular communication with each other. So I'm sure Iran was not surprised by this. This was something that that was decided between them, or maybe Hezbollah just made this independent decision, but I'm sure that they notified the Iranians ahead of time.
Has anything changed in your calculation with an Iranian retaliation? Do you believe that's still happening, or you still couldn't
Yeah,
just?
well, I mean, again today, there was a high-level Iranian commander that came out and said that they will retaliate and it will be serious. They've said this so many times that it's hard for them to crawl back down, walk it back, right? I think they've got to do it, and
Hmm.
it's just a question of when and how. But of course, it can't be forever.
Yeah, we had a listener that was proposed the theory that maybe Iran isn't going to retaliate because Israel is kind of doing a good enough job of destroying itself
Uh-huh.
by, just it continuing to be bombing Syria, bombing Lebanon, and of course carrying out this genocide in Gaza is destroying Israel. The economy is tanking, people are leaving, it's creating more and more animosity, and the longer they do this, the more they lose in terms of world opinion.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
and there's also potentially just the idea that the longer we wait, the more psychological damage we inflict on Israel, economic damage, but also the chance for actually Israel to be preemptive. And I believe there was a statement from Israeli officials telling the United States that war with Iran is inevitable and the United States need to strike Iran now. And then that was pulled back after that comment. But it's very clear what Israel's trying to do. So I'm wondering, do you think that Iran is preparing for everything and it will do a retaliation, but is perhaps allowing Israel more time because they will suffer more and they are more likely to make an error in terms of being preemptive, and further losing world opinion, and then making sure that when Iran does retaliate, there's complete justification. Do you think that's a possibility?
Yeah, I think it is. I just said all the trends. We've discussed some of this earlier. Just that all the trends. I think both short term and long term really favor Iran. We're talking about like the relative power between Israel's main backer, which is of course is the United States, and then Iran's main backers that are China and Russia. The relative trend, the trend favors Russia and China, and then Iran itself is developing economically and militarily. It's much stronger than it was a couple decades ago, and it will be, even stronger a few years from now. But then, true, as you just mentioned, it's just the world opinion is most definitely turning against Israel. And if you're Iran, you're thinking about this. You're thinking about these long-term trends, but you're also just thinking about what's happening right now. Why? Um, why interfere with this process that's unfolding before them? It's just the you could say Israel's suicide. If Israel's committing suicide on the world stage, why stop it? Why give them a chance to shift the focus of attention elsewhere? So
Right. If your
yeah, no,
enemy
you
is
do have a
making
point.
don't interrupt your enemy while they're making mistakes, right? Just let them keep
Yeah, right.
on.
What? Yeah, Clausewitz, right.
Hmm.
If your enemy's making a mistake, you're right. Yeah, let them continue. You don't do anything to prevent it, right? Um, and so, yeah, maybe, again, they intend to retaliate, but we assume that it would be within a couple of weeks or at the most a month or two, but perhaps they'll just draw it out as long as continuing to harm itself. Why stop them?
Yeah. Okay. I want to ask you a question that's just taking it back a little bit. I was just thinking about just the concept of Israel. Do you think it's accurate to describe it really as a settler colony? I mean, this is really kind of a war that's being waged by these sort of new colonial settlers that are fighting the people that they displaced. Is that pretty accurate description?
Yeah, I think it is. There's just no question about it. Um, yeah, I mean, they took the land, and in 1948 they seized a great piece of Palestine, and now they're in the process of seizing more. Both in the West Bank and Gaza, and it's a process that never stopped. Of course, it was especially since the 1967 war. It was very gradual, it was incremental, in the West Bank, but it never stopped. And now it's accelerating, and it's accelerating in a way, especially in Gaza, where everyone can see it. I think there's no question that whatever happens in Gaza, Israel intends to seize more of it for itself.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. It's just interesting. I think to look at it in that framework, I think is a good way to look at it, because kind of the creation of Israel was happened really at the when all these other colonial settlements were being kind of were falling apart, or not really falling apart, say returned back to the
Uh-huh.
indigenous peoples. And I was just
Right.
thinking maybe you can talk a little bit about comparing the types of colonialism that we've seen, because you are actually born in a settler colony. You were born in
Hmm.
Uganda, Kampala, while it was
Right.
still
Well,
ruled under the
yeah,
British, right?
it was a colony. I wouldn't call it a settler colony because there were very few Brits who had settled there. It was governed by Great Britain, but it wasn't settled by them. Now, there are other ones, if you want to look at Rhodesia or South Africa, that's okay. South Africa is a more complicated case, but Rhodesia definitely, and then Kenya too. There was a lot of land farm that was farmland that was, you can say, occupied by British settlers, but that wasn't true in Uganda. It was a colony. It was run by the British up until shortly after my birth in 1962. It was a protectorate. I think that was the official status of the British Empire, when I was born, and then it gained its independence not long afterwards. Um, now, yeah, in general, actually, the feelings of the Ugandan peoples, you say peoples because they're really a very diverse group of tribes there, was in general positive towards the British. That it was, especially in light of some of the horrors that Uganda experienced afterwards. Idi Amin and Milton Obote, hundreds of thousands of people were killed in persecutions and civil conflict. And they look back at that time under the British as being relatively idyllic. So when the British left, there wasn't any much hostility. Now, things are very, very different, of course, in Palestine, because it's not that the Jewish people came and simply governed the people that were there, established a government over them, but expelled them from the land. Again, it was approximately 750,000 that were expelled in the Nakba in 1948. And then,
Was there anything
go ahead.
comparable to, previous, colonial like settlements that we in the past we could look upon historically, or is Israel really just kind of very unique in the way that it's driven to reclaim this land completely and to completely displace it? Because when we talk about, like Uganda or Kenya, like you said, it was more governing. They established institutions, maybe they controlled a lot of the means of production or whatever, but the goal wasn't to rid the land of these people. That was never the
Right,
goal in
right.
Uganda or whatever. There was a lot of brutality, especially here in the Congo under the Belgians. But was there anything comparable like this before? Is there a historical parallel
Well,
that
I
we can
think
look upon?
probably, I mean, I think the American experience is probably the best comparison. I mean, the Native Americans, the Indians were driven from their lands. The March of Tears in Tennessee, right?
Hmm.
Um, uh, I think that's probably the best comparison.
Do Israelis use that as kind of a justification? They say, like, a lot of them
I have
came
never
from.
Right. I have never heard them use that as a justification. They may have. I've heard actually people who are not necessarily, let's Zionists, saying, "Okay, well, we've got to accept Israel." It's kind of like, we drove the Indians from the land, but now it's just a historical fact. It was wrong, but it just happened, and that's okay. Israel's there, and we just have to live with it. It's like, okay, yeah, that age has passed. The Indians are gone. They're very small. They're very small in numbers, and they live on these reservations, and that's just a fact that we really can't change at this point. It's not like all the people, the population of New York is going to get up and move somewhere else and bring the Iroquois back in. That just can't happen. Um, so that doesn't quite work because it's much more recent in history, and there are Palestinians living now, quite a few who were born on what's now called Israel, and they remember quite well. They're still there, and they still want to come back. And so it's not something in the deep past, and also the populations that we're talking about are quite a bit larger. There are a lot of people that I understand themselves to be Palestinians that live in places like, not just the West Bank and in Gaza, but in Lebanon and Jordan and elsewhere. And they consider that their home.
Yeah,
So it's right. So I mean, it's similar to the American experience in the fact that people, just Indians were clearly driven from their land in different parts of the U.S. As the settlers, expanded, but otherwise it's different. I mean, again, they're just when you talk about relative numbers, and also it's simply the fact that it's much more recent. It's nothing in a it's not something that's so far in the past that we can just speak about it as something purely historical matter. It's a living matter. It's a burning issue that needs to be resolved.
I think most Israelis and Jews and Christian Zionists, people that support Israel, will say, well, this isn't actually really a settler colony because this is their original homeland. That if you do architectural digs or you look at old texts, then they can say that this is the land of the Jews, so that they claim that they're not a settler colony. How would you just argue against that?
Well, yeah, I imagine if you actually use that um, as the basis for deciding who should live where, we would, it, we, I think let's say most people find themselves on land that was once occupied by somebody else 2,000 years ago. And you could use that argument to expel these people who have lived there for 2,000 years or longer. It's not like they, necessarily even, they could have been there when it was actually considered to be Israel in ancient times. If you could use that as the justification for driving them from the land, I'm sure you can find similar justifications based on archaeological digs, all around the world, and we would have a huge mess and all kinds of injustice on our hands.
Yeah, no, that argument I think is absolutely ridiculous. I just wanted to see how you'd respond to it, because if you go back in time, everybody's moving everywhere constantly. If you start trying to look historically, like, well, I got Norwegian ancestry or Taiwanese ancestry, I'm allowed to go back, or all the Irish here in America are going to go back to to Ireland or whatever. It's an absurd line of thinking, but there is that really strong belief that there is this right to return. And then that's what, Israel has, that program, the right to return program, to sort of import the Jews from around the world to Israel. I just wonder how they can square that justification with the rest of the world. How is it that Israel gets to say that that's okay, but no other people can say that I have the right to return to some other ancestral land?
Yeah. I think in the end, just no matter how you look at it, the Israelis, I really should say, the Israeli Jews have you can say, an exclusivist, a supremacist, an exceptionalist argument. In the end, it's just like, we're the Jews and we're special. And frankly, the people who support Zionism, in the end, they wouldn't actually put forward these arguments for anything else. But it's simply because these are the Jews and they're special. We're talking about the fact that these colonies were being returned to the indigenous peoples, all around the world, British colonies, French colonies, sometimes peacefully, as the case of my native country, Uganda, sometimes violently, as in Vietnam or Algeria. But there was this process that was just, that I think everybody came to realize was just irresistible. It was an irresistible force. But the one exception to it was the Jews in Palestine. And everything else, all the arguments that everybody accepted, for the liberation of these various peoples around the world, somehow did not apply to Palestinians. I mean, you just kind of change the names, and you say, instead of Palestinians and Jews, we have Black Africans and Dutch colonists. and then you see if anybody can try to make the argument that they make for it to justify Zionism. In other words, the settlement of Palestine by Jews. Make that same kind of argument for any other group, and then you would find, it just wouldn't work. It's only because there is this exceptionalism that surrounds the Jews, that the Jews, many Jews themselves believe in, and a lot of the supporters of Zionism believe in, including, of course, Christian Zionists.
But how and why? How does that happen? It's just so it's just so obvious. I mean, I feel like most people, they just know it down in their bones that there's something wrong with what's happening. I mean, I feel like the Israelis have to some extent. I mean, they just bury it, but this conflict that's happening in Gaza is just so horrific, and it's so public that the whole world sees it. Everybody understands what's happening. Most people, I would say, the majority of the world knows what Israel is doing is wrong, and they want Israel to stop.
Yeah.
But for we've talked about this ad nauseum, but it just all of our politicians in America, they won't say anything about it. And the same thing with Western Europe, even though most people are seeing it, and it's not a black and white, not a nuanced or a gray thing. It's a very black and white situation that most people see happening. But there's no political power or will in the West to change it. Whereas even with something like, for example, Ukraine, I think that for a lot of the Western population, most people, that's a bit more convoluted. They don't maybe fully understand, and so a lot of people will be supporting Ukraine, and they think like, oh, they don't quite get it. But you will have politicians like RFK or Trump or JD Vance that will be like, yeah, this war has to stop. Or even now popping up in Europe, it's becoming more and more popular for politicians to oppose what we're doing in Ukraine, to stop the NATO expansion and the military support to try to keep this war going. That is dying at a fast rate. But in Gaza, it's not the same thing. Even though it's so clear that what Israel is doing is wrong, and I keep on trying to square that away. I'm like, everybody knows what's happening. How did they keep on getting away with it? And how did they? It's just, you talk about this exceptionalism that they can, some support from Christian Zionists, but it just doesn't add up to me. I don't get it.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot in life and human society that's irrational and kind of ultimately just resists any kind of analysis. I mean, it's just sometimes all you can say is it's there. It may not make sense, but it's there. There are these deep emotional attachments to Israel. I mean, you can explain it in part. I mean, there was, I think, like in the case of the United States, we've discussed the phenomenon of Christian Zionism, which is a bizarre phenomenon in itself, but it's there, it's real. But there are a lot of people like RFK, who's not a Christian Zionist, nor is he Jewish, but he is emotionally committed to Israel. And that too is a phenomenon, because we're talking about the political elite, and certainly RFK is part of the political elite. You find a lot of people, or Joe Biden himself. Okay, Joe Biden is an Irish Catholic, so-called. He's not Jewish, he's not a Christian Zionist, but he's a fervent Zionist. Now, how did this happen? Well, I think in part you do have to look at the influence of Hollywood and the media, and you do have to look at Jewish influence in the United States, because those are two areas where it's just a fact. Okay, this is not some crazy conspiracy theory. It's a fact that those two very important sectors are part of, you could call them like factories of, they're cultural factories. They produce the movies that we see, the news that we read and consume, and so therefore they really inform the thinking of Americans. And those two sectors of society are very much dominated by Jews, which have been, up until this time, and is still true. I think maybe perhaps it won't be true in 20 years, because we see a phenomenon of younger Jews starting to break away from Zionism. But it's still true that Jews tend to be Zionists, very, very much committed to the Zionist project. And that has affected the news that people have consumed and the movies they've seen. They see a movie like Exodus, right? I've had people tell me that, that really affected me. This was something that hits people at a deep level, and maybe they'll see a movie like that as a kid, or they'll watch. There was a Holocaust series I remember that came out during the '70s, and that affected people a lot, very, very deeply. So these are things they're currents that run deep in our culture. And it's not easy to change. These people have these very deep-seated feelings, these very that support very powerful commitments to political programs. In this case, to the Zionist project. So when you're fighting Zionism in the U.S., you're up against a lot. You're up against Jewish Zionists, you're up against Christian Zionists. They're separate phenomena, but they obviously support more or less the same thing. And then you have these other people who are neither, but who have been convinced that Zionism is something almost holy.
I think that's very true. It's a big part of, at least here in the United States, this idea that
And then it's
Zionist is a
just like
holy
the
thing.
power of the United States is such that uh, that it ends up shaping. Maybe not so much. Again, you do find much more dissent in Europe, in places like France and Britain, and so on. The but these countries, these governments have become basically vassal states, and so they respond more to the power of the United States, the directions that they receive from the United States, than they do to the sentiments of their own people. I think you can see that very clearly.
It, do you think that politicians like Joe Biden and RFK Jr., Donald Trump, do they share the same dream as the Israelis to create greater Israel? Because this is really the focus of the problem is that Israel won't stop taking land and pushing and continually to ethnically cleanse the land. Like if they pulled back to where the 67 internationally recognized boundaries are, then potentially we could have a two-state solution and they can, maybe not live in complete harmony. They may not like each other, but at least the killing would stop, and Israel could maintain its borders there, and Palestine here, and this would just be something that we could all agree is fair. Okay, Israel, you got your state. It's a little sketchy how you did it, but it's done. Here it is. Here's the 67 line. But you
Yeah.
can't have this open air prison Gaza where you have a policy called mowing the lawn, where every couple of years you go in and just start massacring people, and you can't just constantly pour into the West Bank of Palestine and just take over homes and bulldoze settlements and then build your own little
Yeah.
settlement in the middle there. Like
Yeah.
that's
Cut down olive groves.
right. Cut down all those. So is that something that people that you think
It,
these Zionists support? Because they always say they want a two-state
yeah,
solution.
I don't think so. I think RFK is a decent man, just to give one example. And I don't think Biden himself, supports the these really bloody fantasies of people like Smotrich and Netanyahu, for that matter. I think they have an idealized version of Israel in their head. They believe that somehow it is that Zionism is holy, and the Jewish state is sacrosanct, and must always be supported. And unfortunately, there are some crazies there. Just like America is a great country, but unfortunately, we have some bad people in the Republican Party or in the Democrat Party, whatever. But these are, it's basically a good place, and I think they should be seeing what's happening now. There are a lot of people who thought that way, actually, and no longer do. Their minds have been changed over the last several months because of the horrors, that have been perpetrated in Gaza. But, maybe especially among older people, it's really hard to wake up. You just feel like, Israel's Israel, and you hear something, these accusations, they seem to like wild accusations, and you just brush them aside and say, well, it can't be, it's just some sort of, lefty propaganda, or it's, of course, occasionally mistakes are made in war, collateral damage and all that, and they're just exaggerating it. I'm sure that's what RFK and is doing, for example. He just can't see it because he has that deep emotional commitment that he's just narrowed his vision and has prevented him from seeing what's really going on.
It's just such a powerful force that I keep on coming back to this question. I know I always pepper you with it, like
Yeah.
How does this happen?
Yeah.
Why does it?
Yeah.
How can we
Well, it
be?
is. Well, it's extremely important. I mean, it may be, who knows, this is the force that may bring down, lead to a world war, if not a major regional war. This is the force that may lead to the first use of nuclear weapons since Nagasaki. This is the force that may, in the end, really bring down the United States, because we have hitched our wagon to this entirely, our foreign policy, and we have already, because of this force, Zionism, we have our reputation around the world has taken a huge beating,
Yeah.
and it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, maybe could you explore that a little bit more, just about how isolated the United States is becoming because of its commitments to Israel and to Ukraine, and just the impacts that's going to have on us.
Yeah, well,
What's
you can
the
see it
evidence
most
of the isolation? We'd
well.
start
You
with
can see
that.
it most clearly in UN votes. Recent, we haven't had one recently, but a couple months ago, whenever we have a vote on Israel and Gaza, um, we again and again will find that there's maybe not even a dozen countries in the world that stand with Israel, but it's always the U.S. is with them. The others tend to be, with the exception of, I think recently there was Hungary and the Czech Republic stood with Israel, and then it was just tiny little nothing states like Fiji and the U.S. I mean, it's clear you have votes, and this goes way back. It's not even, this is not a recent phenomenon. This is something that goes back decades. Again and again, when votes are taken on the question of Israel and Palestine, the support for Palestine and for the two-state solution. There was a UN resolution that was passed, actually with the support of the United States, if I remember correctly, shortly after the Six-Day War, that called for just that, for recognition of the original pre-1967, or I should say pre-Six-Day War boundaries as the proper international boundaries that should be the basis for a two-state solution. And again and again, the world has supported that and supported the Palestinians, efforts to bring that about. And then the one force, well, again and again, I guess I should mention, in addition to, well, in the recent votes, even France and Britain, I think most recently, France actually voted against the United States and Britain abstained. So it was just the US and then two other European countries and then non-entities. Um, but anyway, yeah, again, we just find ourselves alone. You'll have a vote of like 150 or 155 to 15. And, this is what happens again and again. So I think that right there just shows you in a very stark terms, the isolation of the U.S. on this question. Now, that's always been there, but it's just now that the focus and the emotional intensity is much greater. It's been a problem that's festered for a long time, but now it's really exploded. And then the U.S.'s position is, something that people were aware of, but now there's a spotlight that's put on it, and it's been really bad for the U.S.
Yeah, it's just becoming so clear to me that the U.S. is in decline, and it's in large part because of our commitments to Israel and to Ukraine, and that this we are furthering our decline through these commitments, and we're becoming increasingly isolated. And it's so obvious to anybody that pays attention to what's going on. But despite this clear damage that we're doing, self-inflicted damage to ourselves, we just keep on doubling down to isolate ourselves further and further, until the U.S. system's going to break. I don't know where we're going to see it first, maybe in the dollar, or I just don't know. I don't know how it's going to all come down, but it's so clear that it's happening right now. Okay, well, maybe let me switch over to some other current news topics. Well, one thing that I'd like to just get your thoughts on are the founder of Telegram, Pavel Durov, was arrested in France. Now, I don't actually use Telegram, but I know you use it a lot. This seems like why was he arrested? Who was behind it, and what are the implications going to be of something like
Okay,
this?
well, he was arrested in France. He flew there, I think, from Azerbaijan in a private jet, and He was arrested upon landing. I think he had reason. He wouldn't have flown there if he thought that he was at risk for arrest. Apparently, he's a fairly cautious guy, and he said, like, "Hey, there's no point to spend time in jail." Um, but I believe that the warrant was issued shortly before he arrived, and secretly. So he was taken by surprise. He wasn't aware that there was a warrant for his arrest. Um, or I guess it is, maybe the technical term is a detention. They haven't actually made a decision on whether or not they're going to bring charges against him at this point. But the charges that have been reported, the potential charges are, I guess, facilitating pedophilia, drug trafficking, and I think there's a third which slips my mind right now. I mean, they're very serious charges, and it's hard to really understand how these charges could be brought against him unless there's something about him that we don't know, but I doubt it. Um, I think the argument is going to be made. We'll find out for sure. When the charges are brought, or if they're brought. Exactly what they're claiming, but they're probably going to claim that because he failed to, let's say, police the content on his platform, Telegram, adequately, that the pedophiles and drug traffickers and other criminals were able to commit their crimes. And so therefore he himself is guilty. Now this is, again, we don't know the details yet, so we can't jump to conclusions. Maybe the French really do have something on him. I'm very skeptical about it. First, the argument that, well, because it was done on his platform, he's guilty. Well, you just think, by analogy, you could say, well, a criminal calls another criminal on the phone. Maybe they arrange it over the phone. Well, therefore, is the telephone company, the president of the telephone company needs to be jailed. I mean, I think that's a fair comparison right there. It's a fair analogy. And then you say, well, if he had been requested by law to, he's asked to conform to certain local laws and he didn't. Okay, well then I don't think that that this is something a jailable offense, but you could say, okay, he needs to be penalized, or his company does. I mean, that's usually the way that you deal with something like that. Like if Google is, you find they're in violation of some law, you don't actually jail the CEO of Google, right? And threaten him with 20 years in prison. You fine Google for failing to comply with certain regulations. But it seems to me that Telegram was trying to, they in general did comply with regulations. I'll give you an example that often I'll get, I subscribe to Mark Sloboda's Telegram channel, and he'll post something, maybe that's on RT or that's on Sputnik, and then I won't be able to see it because it says, I'll get a Telegram message that says this post does not comply with local laws, therefore you cannot see it. So they do actually, he's not a First Amendment absolutist. Sometimes when you read the papers, it's like, yeah, I don't care about any laws. No, he actually does comply with laws, with local laws. So I don't know exactly what the French are going to claim. Now, Macron just came out and said that this has nothing to do with politics. It's just purely a judicial investigation, and that's that. Now, maybe that's true, but I'm just very skeptical. I think that what we're seeing here is something that's driven by the intelligence community. They understand. Telegram is a major platform. I think it has 1 billion users, and it's a very big platform here in Russia. Virtually every Russian has Telegram. It's been a very important platform in connection with the Ukraine war. There are many Ukrainian, many Russian channels, war bloggers on both sides that use Telegram. But this is something that is beyond the reach of Western intelligence. And that's something that Pavel himself, Pavel Durov himself stated in a recent interview with Tucker Carlson. He said that he's being pressured by the CIA, by Western intelligence, to provide a backdoor. They want to be able to access his data, and he said no. And I think that's probably why they're after him. Just like they were, I think it's the same reason that the U.S. is trying to shut down TikTok. It's something that they don't have a backdoor to. Google does, if Facebook, Meta, all that. You can be sure that they're cooperating with Western intelligence, in particular with the CIA and the NSA.
So what is the goal then with arresting him? Just to
Probably to
damage
pressure him.
Telegram? To pressure
Well,
him
it's
to
also,
take
yeah,
Telegram
say,
down? I mean, like what's the
yeah.
goal?
Well,
To
I,
to
I would
to
think as
scare people from speaking, to have a chilling
well,
effect, or
yeah, well, yeah, there's that too. He's been quite open, like he was in that interview with Tucker Carlson. He says, "I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to provide this secret backdoor to the CIA." But I think they want it. It would be a huge prize for them. Well, one thing is it would be a great way to collect data on activities of all kinds of Russians, and I'm sure they would. That's something they could do with. They would love to track the actions and attitudes of Russian individuals, and that's exactly the sort of thing that an intelligence agency does. And by arresting him, they can threaten him, say, "Hey, look, it's 20 years, or maybe, but if you cooperate with us in this way, um, you know, maybe we can or we will reduce the charges to, hey, a year or just probation, or how it works."
wow, that's crazy. It's straight up mafia tactics.
Oh
You
yeah, but I
know,
mean, this is what happens. I, again, we don't know all the details yet, but that's what I suspect. I very strongly suspect that that's what's going on.
right? I heard the founder of Rumble has fled Europe as well because
Right.
he's like, uh-oh. Basically, it's so crazy that the West is going after people advocates of free speech. If because there's information there that the government doesn't like, so they will arrest you, force you to, comply or throw you in jail. That's
Yeah.
it. This is it. Just we've gone full circle. It's like we defeated the Soviet Union and now we've become the new Soviet Union. It's
Right.
like we are controlling as the information space as much as possible. Yeah, and you wonder, like, they start with these big tech companies, but how far does it go? Just us having these types of conversations, should we start to be worried at some point? I mean, I guess that's the chilling effect that they hope that it
Uh-huh.
might have as well. Do you think this is they're going to succeed with this, or do you think it will backfire?
Um, well, it could. I mean, you think about it. There was actually a threat on the part of was it Starmer or was some other British politician to, I think it was Starmer himself, to have Elon Musk arrested for allowing the wrong kinds of opinions on X. Um, yeah, well,
So
I'm sorry, I actually just forgot your question.
yeah, I was just wondering, do you think that they're actually going to succeed with this, or do you think it will backfire on them, or the
Well, I mean, the state has a lot of power, but these new, you could call them kind of, well, maybe not IT oligarchs, but these, um, the owners of these mega platforms, they have a lot of power too. It'll be interesting. Clearly Elon Musk has been fighting a battle. There have been all kinds of efforts to bring him down. So far, he's done pretty well, but he hasn't ended up in jail. I imagine, yeah, we'll see. It does look bad for France, and I imagine that and again, there already have been protests, for example, in front of the French embassy in Moscow, and I know, like in Russia, they're printing like "Bring Pavel Home" T-shirts and that kind of thing. It's not just in Russia though, because he's a Russian, but it, Telegram is a lot larger than that. He's not actually a supporter of Putin or of the Russian government either. So he has widespread support, and it may be that some of that support, some uh, that the French government will feel some pressure, but I don't know if it's strong enough pressure to counter the authority of the U.S. government. And I suspect that that's where this is coming from. It's coming from the CIA.
just every day that goes by, I feel like the U.S. does more and more to paint itself clearly as the bad guy. We were supposed to be the champion of free speech and a democracy, and we're just such it's such a sham. It's so becoming so clear now, and I understand it takes a while for people to realize that hey, America's not number one anymore, or is not the good guy. But it's just like, come on, people, open your eyes, see what's happening. I mean, just look at the Democratic Party right now, where everybody's running on this platform of joy with Kamala Harris, who hasn't done a single unscripted interview since she's been just randomly nominated. She's never won a single, never got a single delegate vote. And everybody's just full on behind her, all in lockstep. It's just, it feels like what I imagined what Maoist China was. Like everybody's on the party. Yes, we follow these lines. Everybody agrees, and we all cheer, say we all adopt
Yeah,
the same. There's no dissent.
right, right. Well, I'll
This
give
is
you an example. It's just that I think it was a couple weeks ago. Um, I got a message from my friend Chip back in Tennessee, and it was like, is this Vance guy weird or what? And I said, like, well, that's a weird off the wall question. And then I think quite seriously, like an hour later, I read an article about how everyone, like all the talking heads and the major media outlets were were just harping on one theme, and that was that JD Vance was weird, and they were using that word again and again and again. And I saw it, so it was working, but that's the kind of thing that happens. So like before, when they were trying to defend Biden, he was sharp as a tack. He was sharp as a tack, sharp as they were all using the same phrase, and then finally that just didn't work anymore. So they dropped it, and they had to get rid of him. But now it's like JD Vance is weird. JD Vance is weird. Now the joy of these kind of words are being used.
yeah, just
I read it in the New
emotions.
York.
Just
Yeah, yeah. It's nothing to do. Nobody's
no,
talking
no,
about policy, right?
right. Because there is no policy, or the policy is just so garbage that they don't even want to present it. So they just say this is a joy platform,
Yeah,
and we say JD
right.
Vance is weird. But it's just amazing how they just they take their marching orders. It's so clear that that's what the
Yeah,
the the Democrat Party really has become the deep state. Like, look, I'm not a big fan of Trump. I'm not a big MAGA guy. There's a lot of there's a lot of problems there, especially like the support for
for Israel,
Netanyahu and Israel
right,
is a real it's a painful thing to
right.
realize that this
To
is how our
observe, yeah,
political system is, right, to
yeah,
observe. But at least within the Republican Party, there is some dissent. Like if you watch the RNC and the DNC, the RNC, there were people that were saying things that disagreed with the person that spoke before. And it was kind of
yeah.
nice to see, like, okay, at least in this platform, on this party, they allow for alternative opinions and they talk about different things, different policies. Whereas in the DNC, it's like, no, everybody has to be ironclad.
Yeah,
We stay in
right.
lockstep. There's no
Yeah.
dissent allowed. It's
I
just,
think, yeah,
it's
the way
creepy.
they, yeah, I think the way they justify it is that, okay, is that Trump is Hitler, and so therefore everything is justified in preventing Hitler from taking power again. So that, yeah, if we need to lie, if we need to dumb everything down to just three words, we'll do it. And if we have to enforce mind-numbing uniformity through our party, we'll do it because we have to defeat Hitler. It's just like this is war, right? We got to put on our uniforms and we got to go and fight and defeat this threat to democracy. Of course, that's the language they use. I mean, democracy is on the line here. We've got to save our democracy, and to save our democracy, we got to squelch dissent, and we've got to just become, you know, lower IQs down to again maybe three or four words and just repeat them incessantly.
Right. And of course have no semblance of any democracy within our own party. Nobody gets to choose or vote or have any say. We're just nominating this person. It's wild. Well, seeing how we're talking about domestic politics, I'd like to hear your take on uh, RFK dropping out and endorsing Trump. Do you think this has a huge impact on the election? Do you think this
Well,
uh,
it's not going to have. Well, it could because it could decide the election. In past elections, and I think close elections, sometimes where there was a third party candidate, at least it's been argued, and I think that with some evidence that if that the presence of a third party candidate actually did tip the election in favor of one candidate or the other, again, he may only have gotten 2% of the vote or something like that. But if it comes down to two or three swing states that is decided by 1 or 2% of the vote, then the presence of RFK on the ballot can decide the election quite clearly. So it could really make a difference. And that's the
Right.
reason that RFK, because he saw that, that's the reason he pulled out. He just decided that, though he's not a complete Trump supporter, he just thought that overall that he felt that the Democratic Party really presented much more of a threat to the future of this country than the Republican Party and Donald Trump. So he felt that he could not, in good conscience, continue in the race to keep his name on the ballot in those swing states.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the only thing that gives me sometimes a little bit of hope about Trump is that having people like RFK join his camp, people like Vivek in his camp, or Dana White and David Sachs, it's just, I feel like he's slowly surrounding himself with better people. I know there's a lot of neocons still in there. But actually, I hear it seems like a lot of some neocons, like never Trumpers, Republicans that are going for Harris, they actually seem to be the neocons. The neocons are kind of moving over into the Democrat Party, especially if their policies really on Russia is their main concern, that they
Yeah,
want to destroy Russia, because that's where the most of the
right.
support is coming from. So
Yeah, well,
you
it makes sense because, okay, really, there's no daylight between the two parties on Israel. Um, yeah, I see. Between the party elites anyway. Of course, there is a difference, a real difference between the bases, but between the party elites, there's just no difference. Maybe there's a difference in tone, but that's all it is, but no substantive difference. So the neocons can see that. Israel is extremely important to the neocons. A lot of them are Jewish, not all of them. That's what they come out of. It's actually um, a certain group of Jewish Americans, but when we talk about neocons, we're talking about more than Jewish Americans. But they've always, made that a central plank, in their platforms. You could put it that way. Have made Zionism. That's a big part of what they are. But they can see that, well, okay, the two parties, we got both the two parties on board with us there. There's no reason to really worry, but there is reason to worry about the Republicans and Russia. Because it seems like among neocons, like the second obsession after Israel is Russia. And in the case, Israel, you have to love Israel, but in the case of Russia, you have to hate Russia. So you have people like Victoria Nuland, who just seem to be, they're just obsessed with hating, just want to destroy Russia. It's rather irrational. And it is hard for me to understand, but it's there, it's real. And um, and so, yeah, if you're a neocon, you probably are going to migrate to the Democratic Party. You're going to be worried about the Republicans. They seem to be going astray in the second most important part of your foreign policy.
Yeah, I just hope people can learn to drop party loyalty. There's just so many people that are just, this is my team and I'm going to back them no matter what. And nobody steps back and just sort of looks at like, hey, what's good for the country? What's good for me? Maybe we should look at some policies. And even when the parties have completely changed, if we just think about everything what the Democrat Party used to stand for, supporting, championing free speech, or the Peace Party, having immigration policies to support the working class in the United States, all these things completely out the window for the Democratic Party, and it's now being presented, in some fashion on the Republican side. But people just don't see it. They just become everything that they said that they hate, slowly over time, and they never learn to kind of gravitate and change. It's just, it's just
Yeah.
human nature, I guess. This.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Okay, well, we're coming up close to an hour. Is there anything you'd like to add real quick, or should we call it a day?
Well, yeah, we don't need to discuss it this time. There was a major missile strike, which may in fact be ongoing. It's not over by Russia targeting Ukraine. It may have been we don't have the total so far, but it may turn out to be the largest missile strike of the war. the Ministry of Defense hasn't gone out and said that this was in retaliation for the Kursk incursion, but a lot of people are looking at it that way. In fact, there was some sort of expectation that there was going to be a major strike, and if you might recall that recently some embassies, like including the U.S. Embassy, advised their citizens to leave Ukraine because they were expecting a major missile strike. Now it seems to be this is what's happening today, but yeah, we
Well,
don't
what are they
really,
targeting?
well, it looks like it's almost entirely energy infrastructure, substations and power plants and some military infrastructure. So it's really a continuation of what they've done. But that may be classic Putin, that he's just not going to be, you're not going to cause him to deviate from his path. He said, this is what he's worked out a strategy that's a war-winning strategy. He's not going to drop that and maybe go after some emotionally satisfying target, like I was mentioning. See, I probably wouldn't make a great leader of a superpower, because I would think, God damn it, we're just going to blow up that building that Zelensky lives in, teach him a lesson. Apparently, he didn't do that. It's just like very calculated. Say, okay, we'll do this. Maybe they haven't said this yet, but we'll at least maybe we'll come out and say this is retaliation for the Kursk incursion. And in a sense, maybe it was, but more importantly, it's going to it's going to mess up Ukraine's logistics. They're almost entirely dependent on the rail system, which is electricity driven, powered by electricity. And if they can't get electricity to the tracks, these trains cannot roll. And if the trains can't roll, they can't get equipment and ammunition to the front, or you can't even get personnel to the front. So I think that's what's going on.
Yeah. Ukrainian winters are pretty brutal from what I understand. So this winter, what's going to happen, do you think?
Yeah, it's going to be rough.
Do you think that could, if the war is still going on, do you think the winter could maybe seal the deal for the Ukrainians?
Yeah. Well, it just may mean that more Ukrainians leave the country and there's more Ukrainian refugees flood into Western Europe. Some of them will make their way to Russia too, I'm sure. But
Yeah, just when I read history, there's always these invasions into Russia, and they'll take great swaths of land because nobody lives there, it's just empty woods. And then the winter comes, and everyone's like, "Damn it, what are we doing here? It's way too cold. We messed up."
It seemed like a really good idea not too long ago.
Yeah, in the summer it was all fun and games, and then obviously it's not going well with fun and games at all here. It's awful what's happening in Kursk. I don't think they're going to be there for that much longer. But the winter is going to be devastating for the Ukrainians.
Right. I was just thinking of a historical incident, that I think is useful in maybe understanding Putin here and his response to the Kursk incursion. During the Battle of Britain, the air battle over Britain, it was, if I remember correctly, the British, the Royal Air Force was holding out very bravely, but they really were overmatched by the Luftwaffe, and it looked like it was just about curtains for the RAF when the British carried out a very daring raid. They bombed Berlin, and that just infuriated Hitler, and so he really dropped the focus on taking out the RAF and began to bomb London, which of course damaged and killed people and so forth, but it didn't have any military value, and it really and because of that, at least some historians argue that the RAF lived and was able to survived, and it was actually an important turning point in the war. So anyway, that's an example. You just say with Putin is not he's not emotional like the mustachioed Austrian was. And a lot of other, it's not just that you have to be some sort of evil dictator to react. I think most people, like you certainly see people, online who's just saying, man, we should just, carpet bomb Kiev, whatever, teach them the
Mm,
lesson. And people get mad, they get worked up, and they want to, take out. They get frustrated with Putin for not doing that. But I think the Russians should be actually happy to have a man like Putin in charge. He just keeps focused on the strategy, sticks to a strategy that's working, and just will
right.
not be waylaid by. I think these are often deliberate provocations by the Ukrainians trying to get him to react emotionally and to escalate in a way that could potentially bring in NATO. But he
Yeah,
doesn't fall
no,
for it.
it's true. It's actually impressive how he keeps very cool headed because you know that our leaders would not. Any type excuse to try to escalate and do something stupid and overreach, we do it, you know. And the same thing, obviously, Israel and Netanyahu. That's all
Yeah,
they
right.
do. That's
Well, in
their
our
game.
case, right, our case, I think the best example of that, or the worst example, if you want, it was the Iraq War in response to 9/11.
Right,
It was emotionally satisfying, but it was a disaster, and it did not accomplish. We know that we don't have to go down that road,
right.
but it was
Oh, okay, all right, Dad. Well, let's end it here then.
okay.
Okay, have a good day.
You too.